The entire restaurant went dead silent. You could hear a pin drop on the carpet of the most expensive dining room in Chicago. 300 people held their breath as Lorenzo Moretti, the capo of the Chicago outfit, pulled a gun on the maitre d'. Why? Because someone dropped a fork. But then a voice cut through the terror. It wasn't a scream. It was a melody. A broke, exhausted waitress did the unthinkable. She walked right up to the Mafia boss's traumatized mute son and whispered 3 words. When the boy opened his mouth and spoke for the first time in 2 years, Lorenzo didn't shoot. He fell to his knees. This is the story of how a waitress saved a monster's heart and how he burned the city down to make her his queen. The aroma of truffle oil and fear always hung heavy at Le Bernardin's Chicago location on Friday nights. But tonight, the air was thick enough to choke on. Imelda Jenkins adjusted her apron, wincing as the coarse fabric rubbed against the burn mark on her forearm, a souvenir from the fryer earlier that shift. At 26, Imelda had the tired eyes of a woman twice her age, and the hands of a surgeon wasted on carrying trays of Wagyu beef to men who tipped in insults rather than cash. "Table 4, the floor manager, Monsieur Sterling, hissed, shoving a heavy silver platter into her hands. His face was pale sweat beading on his upper lip. "Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not make eye contact. And for the love of God, Imelda, do not drop anything." Imelda glanced at table 4. It was the secluded booth in the back, the one shrouded in shadows, even though the crystal chandelier above it was fully lit. Lorenzo Moretti sat there. Everyone in the city knew the face, even if the newspapers were too scared to print it often. He was 32, carved out of granite, and ice wearing a bespoke Brioni suit that cost more than Imelda's entire college tuition had been before she dropped out. He was terrifyingly handsome, in the way a storm is beautiful before it rips your roof off. But Imelda's eyes didn't linger on the Don. They drifted to the small boy sitting next to him. Leo Moretti. 6 years old. He looked like a porcelain doll that had been shattered and glued back together wrong. He was staring at the tablecloth, his small hands gripping a toy car so tightly his knuckles were white. He was famous, too. The Mute Prince. The boy who hadn't uttered a sound since the car bomb that killed his mother 2 years ago. "Yes, sir," Imelda whispered to the manager, balancing the tray. She walked towards the table. Her heart wasn't pounding because of the Mafia boss. It was pounding because she recognized the look in the boy's eyes. It was the freeze response. She had seen it 100 times during her residency at Northwestern, before her life fell apart. The kid wasn't just shy. He was trapped in a neurological loop of terror. Imelda placed the plates down. Clink, clink. Lorenzo didn't look up from his phone. He was typing something that probably decided the fate of a shipping lane in the Atlantic. "Enjoy your meal," Imelda said softly. Lorenzo waved a hand, a dismissive gesture to make her vanish. She turned to leave. That was when it happened. A busboy, new and terrified, rushed past with a water pitcher. His elbow clipped the back of Leo's chair. It was a gentle bump, barely anything. But to Leo, it was an explosion. The boy flinched so hard his arm lashed out, sweeping his untouched glass of sparkling water off the table. Crash. The sound was deafening in the hushed room. The crystal shattered. Water soaked the expensive tablecloth and splashed onto Lorenzo's pristine Italian leather shoes. The music stopped. The conversation stopped. Lorenzo Moretti slowly put his phone down. The silence that followed was heavy, violent. He looked at the spilled water, then at his son. Leo was hyperventilating. His mouth opened in a silent scream, his chest heaving, but no sound came out. He was clawing at his throat, a classic sign of panic-induced vocal cord dysfunction. "Leo," Lorenzo said, his voice low and dangerous. Not angry at the boy, but frustrated. The frustration of a powerful man who could control everything except his own son. "Stop it. Breathe." Leo couldn't breathe. He was turning blue. "I said breathe." Lorenzo snapped, his voice rising. He stood up, knocking his chair back. The busboy who caused the accident was already sobbing in the corner, thinking he was about to die. Sterling, the manager, rushed over. "Mr. Moretti, I am so sorry. I will handle—" "Get out of my face," Lorenzo growled. He reached for his son, grabbing the boy's shoulders. "Leo." "Look at me." The boy was shaking violently, tears streaming down his face, totally locked in his own head. Imelda watched from the service station. She knew protocol. Walk away. Don't get involved. Rich men hate when the help interferes. But she saw Leo's lips turning a darker shade of violet. He wasn't getting oxygen. The panic attack was triggering a laryngospasm. Screw the job, Imelda thought. She dropped her tray on the service counter loudly and marched to table 4. "Let him go," Imelda commanded. The entire restaurant gasped. Lorenzo Moretti whipped his head around. His eyes were like gunmetal. "Excuse me. I said let him go. You're making it worse. He's constricting." Imelda didn't flinch. She stepped right into the personal space of the most dangerous man in Illinois. She shoved Lorenzo's hands away from the boy, an act that should have gotten her shot on the spot. Lorenzo was so shocked by the audacity that he actually stepped back. Imelda knelt on the broken glass. She didn't care about the shards digging into her knees. She lowered her head so she was below Leo's eye level. "Leo," she whispered. Not in a baby voice, but in a rhythmic, melodic tone. She started tapping a steady 4/4 beat on the table with her fingernail. Tap, 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 tap. "Look at the water, Leo," she said, matching her words to the rhythm. "The water is just water. It's not fire. It's just wet." Leo's eyes darted to her. He was still gasping, choking on air. "Can you hear the tapping?" Imelda asked, keeping her voice strictly melodic. She knew that speech centers in the left brain were damaged by trauma, but the singing centers in the right brain often remained intact. It was melodic intonation therapy. "Copy me," Imelda hummed a low note. Lorenzo reached for his jacket, presumably for a weapon, or to signal his guards. "What the hell do you think you're doing to my son?" "Shut up!" Imelda snapped at the Don without looking at him. "He's trying to sink." She focused entirely on the boy. She hummed again, vibrating the sound deep in her throat. Leo's chest hitched. He stopped clawing at his neck. His eyes locked onto Imelda's. Imelda repeated, nodding. Leo's mouth opened. A tiny, creaky sound came out. The air in the room shifted. "Good." Imelda smiled, a genuine warm smile that transformed her tired face. "Now the water. Say, wet." She sang the word on a falling third interval. Wet. Leo took a shuddering breath. He looked at the puddle. Wet," he croaked. Lorenzo froze. He stood like a statue, his hand halfway to his inside pocket. He hadn't heard his son speak a coherent word in 730 days. Imelda didn't stop. Is the car wet?" Leo looked at his toy on the table. He picked it up. His hands were shaking less. "No," Leo whispered. "Is Daddy wet?" Imelda asked playfully. Leo looked up at the terrifying giant looming over them. A tiny ghost of a smile touched the boy's lips. "Yes," Leo said. clear as a bell. Imelda let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. She slumped back slightly, suddenly aware of the pain in her knees. She looked down. Her uniform pants were stained with blood where the glass had cut her. She stood up, wincing, and finally looked at Lorenzo. The Don wasn't looking at his son anymore. He was looking at her. The look wasn't gratitude. It was the look a predator gives when it finds a new, fascinating species. It was possessive, calculating. Imelda stammered, the adrenaline fading, leaving her terrified. "I'm sorry, sir. I studied speech pathology. He just needed a rhythmic bridge to bypass the anxiety block." Lorenzo didn't speak. He stepped closer to her, invading her space. He smelled of expensive Scotch gunpowder and rain. He looked at her name tag. "Imelda," he said. His voice was deep, vibrating through her chest. "Yes, sir." "You're bleeding." It's fine." Lorenzo turned to the manager, Sterling, who was cowering by the wine rack. "Bring me a first aid kit, and a bottle of the 82 Chateau Margaux." Lorenzo turned back to Imelda. "Sit down." "Sir, I can't sit with guests. I'll get her fired. If anyone fires you, I'll burn this building to the ground with them inside," Lorenzo said calmly. He pulled out the chair opposite him. "Sit." Imelda sat. For the next hour, Lorenzo Moretti didn't ask her about the weather. He asked her precisely how she did it. He watched her interact with Leo. And for the first time in 2 years, Leo ate his dinner, occasionally pointing at things and whispering words to Imelda. When the check came, Lorenzo didn't pay it. He simply stood up. He took a business card out of his pocket, heavy black cardstock with gold embossing. Just a number. No name. "You have a shift tomorrow?" he asked. "Double shift." Imelda sighed, looking at her bandaged knees. "Not anymore," Lorenzo said. He scooped Leo up in his arms. The boy looked back at Imelda and waved. "Wait, what does that mean?" Imelda stood up. Lorenzo paused at the door. He turned back his dark eyes, sweeping over her cheap uniform, her messy hair, her tired stance. "It means," Lorenzo said, "that you just became the most important person in Chicago. Go home, Imelda. I'll see you tomorrow." Imelda didn't know it then, but she had just walked into the lion's den, and the lion had just decided he was never letting her leave. Imelda lived in a shoebox apartment in the Humboldt Park neighborhood. It was the kind of place where the radiator clanked like a dying engine, and the sirens were a nightly lullaby. The morning after the incident at Le Bernardin, Imelda woke up to a pounding headache and a pounding on her door. She checked her phone. 10:00 a.m. She was late for her shift at the diner, her second job. She groaned, rolling out of bed, grabbing her robe. "Coming!" "Hold on!" she yelled. She unlocked the 3 deadbolts and swung the door open, expecting her landlord, Mr. Kowalski, coming to yell about the rent being 2 days late. It wasn't Mr. Kowalski. Standing in her dimly lit, peeling hallway was a man who looked like a mountain, dressed in a suit. He had a scar running through his eyebrow and was holding a briefcase. "Imelda Jenkins?" the man asked. "Who are you?" Imelda tried to close the door, but the man put a polished shoe in the jamb. "My name is Dante. I work for Mr. Moretti. He requested your presence." "I have to go to work," Imelda said, panic rising. "I work at Jim's Diner on North Ave. If I'm late, I lose the tips and I can't pay rent." Dante didn't smile. He stepped aside. Behind him, 2 other men were carrying large boxes up the stairs. "Mr. Moretti is aware of your financial situation," Dante said. "He has acquired your debt." Imelda froze. "What? Your student loans from Northwestern? Your credit card debt from your mother's medical bills before she passed? And your rent?" Dante checked a piece of paper. It has all been settled as of 900 a.m. this morning. Imelda felt the blood drain from her face. This wasn't a gift. This was ownership. I didn't ask for that. I can't pay him back. He doesn't want money, Dante said. Get dressed, Miss Jenkins. The car is downstairs. The car was a Rolls-Royce Phantom, idling in front of her crumbling apartment building like a spaceship that had landed in a junkyard. The neighbors were staring from their windows. The drive was silent. They didn't go to the restaurant. They didn't go to a Mafia compound. They drove to the West Loop, stopping in front of an old, boarded-up brick building on Washington Boulevard. It used to be a textile factory, then a failed hipster coffee shop. Now it was just abandoned. But the front door was open. Lorenzo Moretti was standing on the sidewalk, wearing a charcoal wool coat, looking at the building like he was inspecting a fortress. Leo was with him holding the hand of a nanny, but when he saw the car pull up, he pulled away and ran toward it. Imelda stepped out. Before she could say anything, Leo hugged her legs. "Imelda," he squeaked. It was raspy, but it was a word. Imelda's heart melted instantly. She crouched down. "Hey, buddy, you using your voice today?" Leo nodded vigorously. Lorenzo walked over. The daylight made him look even sharper, his angles more severe. "He asked for you this morning. First thing he said, Imelda." "Mr. Moretti?" Imelda stood up, crossing her arms to hide the trembling of her hands. "You paid off my debt. Why I don't like owing people." "I don't like my son being mute," Lorenzo countered smoothly. "Consider it a retainer." "A retainer for what?" Lorenzo gestured to the boarded-up building behind him. "For this." He handed her a set of keys. "What is this?" Imelda looked at the heavy brass keys. "I did a background check on you, Imelda. Thoroughly." Lorenzo began to walk toward the building, expecting her to follow. She did. "You were top of your class at Northwestern. You were publishing papers on selective mutism and pediatric trauma before you were 24. You were the rising star." They stepped inside. The interior was gutted. Dust motes danced in the light beams coming through the dirty windows. It was huge. Ideally, it was a blank canvas. "You lost your residency." Lorenzo continued, his voice echoing in the empty space. "Because you refused to diagnose the chief of medicine's grandson with autism, when the kid was clearly suffering from abuse. You stood your ground. They blacklisted you." Imelda stopped walking. The old shame burned in her chest. "You know a lot for a guy I met yesterday." "I know everything." Lorenzo turned to face her. "You tried to open a free clinic in a church basement last year. It failed because you ran out of funds. You want to help kids who have no voice. Kids like my son." He spread his arms wide. "This building is yours. The deed is in your name. The contractors are already hired. They start Monday. You will build the best speech pathology and trauma center in the Midwest, right here." Imelda looked around. She saw the potential, the therapy rooms, the sensory gyms, the waiting room. It was her dream. The dream she had buried under dirty dishes and grease stains. "What's the catch?" Imelda whispered. "There's always a catch with men like you." Lorenzo stepped closer. He reached out and tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers were warm, and the touch sent a jolt of electricity down her spine that she definitely did not want to feel. "The catch," Lorenzo said, his voice dropping to that dangerous, intimate register, "is that you work for me. You treat Leo. Every day. Whatever he needs. You fix him. And if I can't, you made him speak in 5 minutes when the best doctors in Switzerland couldn't do it in 2 years," Lorenzo said. "You will fix him." "Is that a threat?" "It's an investment." Lorenzo's eyes bored into hers. "But there is one more condition." "Which is?" You move into my estate. Today." Imelda laughed, a nervous, incredulous sound. "Absolutely not. I'm not moving into a mob boss's house. I have a life. I have a cat." "Bring the cat," Lorenzo said, turning to walk away. "Leo needs stability. He needs you close. And frankly, Imelda, now that the city knows you're the one who made the Moretti heir, speak, you have a target on your back. The Russian mob, the triads. They all know that the way to get to me is through my son. And now the way to get to my son is through you." He stopped at the door and looked back. "You're not just a speech therapist anymore, Imelda. You're a high-value asset. If you stay in that apartment in Humboldt Park, you'll be kidnapped by sundown." Imelda looked at the keys in her hand. Then she looked at Leo, who was tracing patterns in the dust on the floor, humming the tune she taught him. She realized then that Lorenzo wasn't asking. He had maneuvered her into a corner so elegant she hadn't even seen the walls go up. "Fine," Imelda said, her voice shaking. "But I designed the clinic. My way. No laundering money through my practice." Lorenzo smirked. It was the first time she had seen him make an expression that wasn't pure intimidation. It was devastatingly attractive. "Deal," he said. "Welcome to the family, Imelda." As she walked out into the sunlight, Imelda had a sinking feeling. She might be able to fix Leo's voice, but she had no idea how she was going to survive his father. The Moretti estate wasn't a house. It was a fortress disguised as a French chateau, sitting behind 20-foot iron gates in the ultra-wealthy suburb of Winnetka, north of Chicago. As the Rolls-Royce crunched up the gravel driveway, Imelda clutched her cat carrier like a life preserver. Her tabby cat Barnaby let out a distressed yowl that matched Imelda's internal monologue. "Welcome home," Lorenzo said dryly, as the car stopped. The front doors opened, revealing a staff of 6 waiting in a line. The house was breathtaking marble floors that shone like water, a staircase straight out of Titanic, and art on the walls that Imelda recognized from her art history textbooks. But the air was cold, sterile. It felt like a museum where nobody was allowed to touch anything. Lorenzo didn't introduce her to the staff. He barked orders at Dante about security protocols and strode toward his study. "Mrs. Gable will show you to your wing," he threw over his shoulder. "Dinner is at 7 sharp. Do not be late. And Imelda, dress appropriately. You're not a waitress anymore." Imelda bristled. She wanted to throw her cat carrier at his expensive suit. Mrs. Gable, the housekeeper, was a severe woman in her 60s, with hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. She led Imelda up the grand staircase to the east wing. "Mr. Moretti's suite is in the west wing," Mrs. Gable said pointedly. "Leo's room is down the hall from yours. The Don values quiet above all else. See that you maintain it." Imelda's room was bigger than her entire old apartment. It had a 4-poster bed, a walk-in closet filled with clothes in her size, which was creepy, and a balcony overlooking Lake Michigan. It was luxurious, and it terrified her. She didn't unpack. She let Barnaby out, then immediately went down the hall to Leo's room. The door was ajar. Inside the room was a chaotic explosion of expensive toys. Lego sets worth thousands of dollars sat unopened in boxes. A miniature electric Ferrari was parked in the corner. Leo was sitting in the middle of the floor, surrounded by a moat of stuffed animals, staring at a tablet. "Knock, knock," Imelda said, softly, leaning against the doorframe. Leo looked up, his eyes so like his father's. Dark, intense eyes widened. He scrambled up and ran to her. Burying his face in her stomach, Imelda knelt down, hugging him back. He felt thin, fragile. "Hey, Leo. Big change today, huh? She kept her voice level, melodic. New house for me, new friend for you. She pulled away slightly and tapped a rhythm on his shoulder. Tap, tap, tap. Leo mimicked it on her arm. Tap, tap, tap. Good, she smiled. Can you show me your favorite thing in this whole room? Leo hesitated. He looked at the mountain of expensive toys. Then he walked past them to his pillow. He lifted it and pulled out a worn, dog-eared photograph. He brought it to Imelda. It was a picture of a beautiful laughing woman holding a baby Leo on a beach. Mama, Leo whispered. It was barely audible, like wind through dry leaves. Imelda's heart broke. She realized then that Lorenzo's approach, burying the boy in expensive distractions and demanding he snap out of it, was the worst possible thing for him. Leo didn't need toys. He needed permission to grieve. She's beautiful, Leo, Imelda whispered back. It's okay to miss her. It's okay to be sad. Leo looked at her, stunned. It seemed no one had ever told him that before. Just then the doorway darkened. Lorenzo stood there, his presence sucking the oxygen out of the room. He saw the photo in Leo's hand, and his jaw tightened so hard Imelda thought a tooth might crack. Dinner, Lorenzo growled. Now. He turned and walked away. Leo immediately stiffened, the progress vanishing instantly as he retreated back into his shell. Imelda stood up, fury bubbling in her veins. She wasn't just fighting Leo's trauma anymore. She was fighting the man who was causing it. 2 weeks passed. Imelda fell into a strange high-tension routine. Mornings were spent at the construction site on Washington Boulevard, arguing with contractors who didn't like taking orders from a woman until Dante would show up and silently stand behind her, sharpening a knife. Suddenly the contractors became very cooperative. Afternoons were for Leo. Imelda transformed a sunroom in the estate into a sensory safe zone. No loud noises, soft lighting, therapy swings, and kinetic sand. She didn't pressure him to speak. They communicated through rhythm drawing and humming. Leo was blossoming. He was smiling more. He would hum along with Imelda's songs. He whispered words when they were alone. Hungry, cat, play. Evenings, however, were a battlefield. Dinner was a formal affair, at a table long enough to land a plane on. Lorenzo sat at the head, radiating broody silence, checking his multiple phones. One Tuesday night, a massive Midwestern thunderstorm rolled in over Lake Michigan. The sky turned green, and thunder shook the foundations of the massive house. At the first crack of thunder, Leo, who was eating peas one by one, dropped his fork and put his hands over his ears. He started to rock back and forth, a low whine building in his throat. Lorenzo slammed his hand on the table. Leonardo, stop it. It's just noise. Leo flinched violently, crying harder, silent sobs that racked his small body. He can't help it, Lorenzo, Imelda snapped, abandoning the sir. It's a trauma trigger. The noise sounds like the bomb. He needs to toughen up. The world is loud. If he hides every time there's a noise, he'll get eaten alive. Lorenzo stood up, looming over the boy. Look at me, Leo. Imelda couldn't take it. She threw her linen napkin down and bolted around the table. She physically placed herself between the Don and his son. Back off, Imelda hissed, glaring up at Lorenzo. Lorenzo looked ready to snap her neck. You do not give me orders in my own house, Imelda. Then stop acting like a bully instead of a father. She turned her back on the most dangerous man in Chicago and knelt in front of Leo. Leo eyes on me, she said, using her therapist voice, firm, calm, rhythmic. She took his small hands in hers and started clapping a slow beat against her own palms. Clap, clap, Clap. Feel that? She asked. The thunder cracked again. Boom. Leo whimpered. Wait for it, Imelda said, holding the rhythm. Nature is playing drums. That was a big crash cymbal. Now wait for the bass drum. Another rumble of thunder, quieter this time. There it is, Imelda hummed. Boom, boom, boom. Leo stared at her, his tears stopping. He was focusing on her rhythm instead of the chaos outside. Can you do it? Imelda asked. Slowly, shakily, Leo tapped his hands together. Clap. Clap. Lorenzo watched from above. He watched this woman who looked like a strong breeze could knock her over, diffuse his son's panic, with nothing but patience and a beat. He saw the color return to Leo's face. He felt a strange tightening in his chest, a feeling he hadn't had in years. It wasn't just respect. It was something hotter, something more dangerous. I'll take him up to bed, Imelda said quietly, not looking at Lorenzo, scooping the exhausted boy into her arms. Later that night, Imelda couldn't sleep. The adrenaline from the confrontation was still coursing through her. She went downstairs to the library to find a book. The library smelled of old paper and expensive brandy. Lorenzo was there, sitting in a leather armchair by the fireplace, turning a glass of amber liquid in his hand. The firelight danced on the sharp planes of his face, making him look almost demonic. He didn't look up when she entered. You undermined me in front of my son. You were hurting him, Imelda retorted, staying near the door. I am trying to prepare him for the life he has to lead. He is a Moretti. He will inherit this city. He cannot cry at thunder. He's 6 Lorenzo, and he watched his mother die in a car explosion. He doesn't need toughening up. He needs to feel safe. Imelda stepped closer, her anger overriding her fear. Why are you so afraid of his emotions? Lorenzo looked up then. His eyes were bleak, empty holes. Because emotions get you killed in my world. My wife. She was emotional. She insisted on taking that car that day, because she was angry with me. If she had just listened, if she had just been cold and logical. He downed the rest of his drink. The vulnerability was gone in a flash, replaced by steel. Dante tells me the Ivanov family is asking questions about the clinic, Lorenzo said, shifting gears instantly. They know I'm building something big. They suspect it's for Leo. The Russians, Imelda felt a chill. They are animals. They don't have codes like we do. If they find out you are the key to Leo's recovery, they won't just threaten you, Imelda. They will take you and break you to get to me. He stood up and walked toward her. He stopped inches away. The heat coming off him was intense. She could smell the brandy on his breath mixed with that unique scent of danger that clung to him. You are doing good work with the boy, Lorenzo murmured, his voice rough velvet. But do not mistake my indulgence for weakness. You belong to me now, Imelda, and I protect what is mine, no matter the cost. He reached out his hand, hovering near her face. Imelda held her breath. Her body betrayed her. She leaned slightly toward his touch. Then his hand dropped. Go to bed. Imelda fled to her room. Her heart pounding not from fear this time, but from a confused, burning desire that was far more dangerous than any Russian mobster. The clinic was nearing completion. It was beautiful. Natural wood floors, high ceilings, soundproof therapy rooms. Imelda's vision was coming to life. It was a Friday afternoon. Imelda was at the site, supervising the installation of a sensory climbing wall in the main gym. Lorenzo had insisted on coming along. He was pacing the perimeter of the building site, talking on his phone in rapid-fire Italian, his hand never straying far from the bulge under his suit jacket. His presence made the construction workers nervous, but it made Imelda feel a strange, reluctant sense of safety. "Mr. Moretti, I don't need a babysitter," Imelda said when he walked inside to inspect the paint colors. "You're not being babysat. You're being guarded." He tapped a wall. "Is this bulletproof drywall?" "It's a speech therapy clinic for children, Lorenzo, not a bunker." "In my world, they are the same thing." Suddenly, tires screeched outside. Lorenzo stopped talking mid-sentence. His head snapped toward the front windows. 3 black SUVs roared over the curb, smashing through the temporary construction fencing. They screeched to a halt in a semicircle around the clinic entrance. Men in ski masks poured out carrying automatic weapons. "Get down!" Lorenzo roared. He didn't grab Imelda's arm delicately. He tackled her. He hit her with the force of a linebacker, driving her to the sawdust-covered floor behind a stack of drywall sheets, just as the glass front of the clinic exploded inward in a hail of bullets. Rat-tat-tat-tat-tat. The sound was deafening. Wood splintered around them. Imelda screamed, curling into a ball. Lorenzo was on top of her, his heavy body shielding hers completely. He wasn't panicked. He was ice-cold. He pulled 2 handguns from his waistband. "Stay down. Do not move. Do not make a sound," he commanded into her ear. Then the Don of Chicago went to work. He popped up from behind the drywall, firing with terrifying precision. Bang. 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 2 men outside dropped. Imelda pressed her hands over her ears, squeezing her eyes shut. This couldn't be real. This was a movie. This was a nightmare. More gunfire, shouts in Russian. Lorenzo was moving, shifting cover, returning fire, drawing their attention away from her. Dante and his security team, who had been in the parking lot, engaged from the flank. It was a war zone in the middle of the West Loop. It lasted maybe 3 minutes, but it felt like an hour. Then silence, broken only by groans and the wail of distant police sirens. "Clear," Dante yelled from outside. Lorenzo returned to where Imelda was huddled. He holstered his hot weapons and knelt down. "Imelda, are you hit?" His voice was tight, urgent. She shook her head, mute with terror. She was trembling so violently her teeth chattered. Lorenzo grabbed her face in his hands, forcing her to look at him. His eyes were bulled, the pupils blown wide with adrenaline. There was blood on his cheek, a splinter cut, not a bullet hole. "Look at me. You're alive. I told you I would protect you." Imelda looked at the devastation around them, her dream clinic riddled with holes, the violence he brought into her life. You people are monsters," she whispered, tears streaming down her dusty face. "All of you." Lorenzo's expression hardened. The mask of the cold killer slid back into place. He yanked her to her feet, pulling her tightly against his chest as Dante rushed in. "Get her to the car. Burn the SUVs left behind. No traces," Lorenzo ordered Dante. He looked down at Imelda, his grip on her arm bruising. The adrenaline of the fight had shifted into something else, a raw, possessive fury, that they had dared to touch her. "You're right," Lorenzo hissed into her ear as he dragged her toward the back exit. "I am a monster, and you're stuck with me. You wanted to save my son. This is the price. There is no going back now, Imelda. You are completely and utterly mine." The ride back to the Winnetka estate was a blur of speed and silence. Lorenzo drove the damaged SUV himself, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, blood from his cheek dripping onto his pristine collar. When they arrived, the gate slammed shut behind them with a finality that echoed in Imelda's bones. "Get inside," Lorenzo ordered, marching her through the front door. "Dante lockdown protocol. Level 1. No one in or out. If a squirrel crosses the lawn, shoot it." He dragged Imelda up the stairs, not to her room, but to his. His suite was dark, masculine, and smelled of cedar and iron. He kicked the door shut and immediately began stripping off his ruined jacket, tossing his holster onto the bed. "Sit," he commanded, pointing to the edge of the mattress. "Stop ordering me around," Imelda yelled, her shock finally giving way to hysteria. She stood her ground, trembling. "You almost got me killed." "Those men. They had machine guns, Lorenzo." "I treat children. I teach kids how to say apple and spoon. I don't dodge bullets." Lorenzo turned to her. He was shirtless now, revealing a torso that was a map of violence. Scars from knives, bullets, and burns crisscrossed his olive skin. But there was a fresh cut on his side from the debris bleeding sluggishly. "You think I wanted this?" Lorenzo roared back, stepping into her space. "I tried to keep you out of it. But you are the only thing that matters to my son. And now—" He stopped breathing hard, his eyes scanning her face frantically. "Now you are the only thing that matters to me." The silence that followed was louder than the gunshots. Imelda stared at him. "What?" Lorenzo looked like he hadn't meant to say it. He looked furious at his own weakness. "I have never feared anything, Imelda. Not death, not prison, not God. But when that glass shattered today, I felt fear." He winced, clutching his side. The adrenaline was wearing off, and the pain was setting in. Imelda's instinct as a healer overrode her anger. She sighed, her shoulders slumping. "You're bleeding. It's a scratch. It needs stitches. Sit down." Surprisingly, the Don of Chicago obeyed. He sat on the edge of the bed. Imelda went to the master bathroom, grabbed the first aid kit she knew he kept there, and returned. She knelt between his legs, cleaning the wound with antiseptic. He hissed, but didn't pull away. His skin was burning hot to the touch. "Why me?" Imelda whispered, her hands steady as she threaded a needle. "I'm just a waitress. A failed doctor." "You are not a failure," Lorenzo gritted out, watching her work. "You are the only person who ever stood up to me. You looked the devil in the eye and told him to be a better father." He reached out his rough hand, cupping her jaw, tilting her face up. "You are the light, Imelda, and I am the dark. I need you to see the shadows, so I don't lose my way entirely." Imelda looked into his eyes. She saw the monster, yes, but she also saw the man lonely, desperate, and fiercely protective. "This is going to hurt," she whispered, referring to the stitch. "Do it," he said, his eyes dropping to her lips. As she finished the last stitch, Lorenzo didn't let her pull away. He leaned down and kissed her. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a claiming. It tasted of blood and whiskey and desperation. Imelda dropped the medical kit. She tangled her hands in his hair, pulling him closer. For a moment, the war outside didn't exist. There was only this, the fire between the waitress and the king. The next morning, the bubble burst. Imelda woke up in Lorenzo's bed alone. The sheets were cold. She dressed quickly and went downstairs. The house was strangely quiet. Too quiet. "Lorenzo," she called out. "Leo." She walked into the kitchen. There was no staff, no Mrs. Gable, no chef. Just a man sitting at the kitchen island, drinking a cup of coffee. It wasn't Lorenzo. It was a man with a shaved head and a tattoo of a spider on his neck. He smiled, revealing silver teeth. "Good morning, Dr. Jenkins," the man said in a thick Russian accent. Imelda froze. "Who are you?" "Where is the security?" "Your security negotiated," the Russian said, standing up. He held a pistol loosely in his hand. Mr. Moretti is currently occupied at the warehouse district. We sent a diversion. He took the bait. He left the castle unguarded. Where is Leo? Imelda screamed, looking toward the back door. The boy is in the car, the Russian said. And you are coming with us. Dmitri Ivanov wants to have a chat with the woman who melted the Ice King's heart. Imelda's mind raced. Lorenzo was gone. The guards were dead or bought off. She was alone. I'm not going anywhere with you, Imelda said, grabbing a heavy cast-iron skillet from the stove. The Russian laughed. Cute. He raised the gun, but he didn't see the shadow move behind him. It wasn't Lorenzo. It was small. Leo. The boy hadn't been in the car. He had been hiding in the pantry. He rushed out holding a steak knife he must have taken from the butcher block. He didn't attack the Russian. He wasn't strong enough. Instead, Leo did something smarter. He slammed his hand onto the button for the garbage disposal. Crunch! The sudden, violent, mechanical roar startled the Russian. He flinched, turning his head for a split second. That was all Imelda needed. She swung the cast-iron skillet with all the rage of a woman protecting her child. Clang! The skillet connected with the Russian's temple. He dropped like a sack of potatoes. Imelda didn't wait. She dropped the pan and grabbed Leo. Run! She gasped. To the panic room! Now! They made it to the panic room in the basement, a reinforced steel vault stocked with water and monitors. Imelda locked the door and slid down the wall, pulling Leo into her lap. You were so brave, she sobbed, kissing his forehead. You saved me, Leo. Leo was shaking, but his eyes were clear. He pointed to the monitors. On the screens, Imelda saw them. 3 more black SUVs pulling up to the front of the house. More Russians. They had breached the perimeter. They were coming to finish the job. Imelda checked her phone. No signal. The panic room was shielded, but the landline was dead. We have to wait for your dad, Imelda whispered. But on the monitor, she saw something that made her blood run cold. The Russians weren't just searching. They were planting explosives on the structural pillars of the house. They weren't going to storm the panic room. They were going to bring the whole house down on top of it. They wanted to bury them alive. They're going to blow it up, Imelda realized with horror. We can't stay here. If the house collapses, the ventilation will be cut off. We'll suffocate. She looked at Leo. We have to go out. We have to make a run for the garage. Daddy has a backup car there. It was a suicide mission, but staying was a death sentence. Imelda grabbed a flare gun from the panic room's emergency kit. Stay behind me, Leo. Hold my jacket. Do not let go. They unlocked the heavy steel door. The house was silent again. They crept through the hallway. The smell of gasoline was heavy in the air. They reached the foyer. The front doors were blown open. Almost there, Imelda whispered. Going somewhere. A voice boomed from the top of the stairs. Dmitri Ivanov stood on the landing. He was a giant of a man, wearing a white suit that looked ridiculous amidst the carnage. He held a detonator in one hand and an assault rifle in the other. The little bird and the mute prince, Dmitri sneered. Lorenzo will weep tears of blood when he finds you in the ashes. Imelda raised the flare gun. Let us go, or I swear to God, you will shoot a firework at me. Dmitri laughed. He raised his rifle. Goodbye, Dr. Jenkins. Crash. The stained glass window behind Dmitri exploded. Lorenzo Moretti swung in on a grappling line like a dark angel of death, shattering the glass and slamming feet first into Dmitri's back. The 2 men tumbled down the grand staircase, a tangle of limbs and fury. The rifle skittered across the marble floor. The detonator flew into the corner. Lorenzo was already injured from yesterday, and he had obviously fought his way back here. His shirt was torn. his face bruised. But he fought with the desperation of a father. He punched Dmitri, the sound of bone on bone echoing in the foyer. Dmitri, younger and bigger, threw Lorenzo off, sending him crashing into a marble pedestal. Lorenzo groaned, trying to rise, but Dmitri kicked him in the ribs. Lorenzo collapsed, coughing blood. Dmitri pulled a knife from his boot. He walked over to Lorenzo, who was struggling to get up. "Look at you," Dmitri spat. "The great Don Moretti, dying on his own floor." Dmitri raised the knife for the killing blow. Lorenzo was dazed, his vision swimming. He couldn't block it. Imelda screamed, raising the flare gun, but her hands were shaking too hard to aim. Then a voice cut through the noise. It wasn't a whisper. It wasn't a croak. It was a scream. A roar. "Leave my dad alone." Leo stepped out from behind Imelda. He stood in the middle of the room. His small fists clenched, his chest heaving. Dmitri froze. The shock of the mute prince screaming froze him for one crucial second. Lorenzo heard the voice. It acted like a shot of pure adrenaline straight to his heart. His son was speaking. With a roar of effort, Lorenzo surged up. He didn't block the knife. He caught the blade with his bare hand, the steel slicing through his palm. But he didn't let go. He headbutted Dmitri, shattering the Russian's nose. Dmitri staggered back. Lorenzo didn't stop. He picked up the marble bust that had fallen from the pedestal and swung it with all his remaining strength. It connected. Dmitri went down and didn't move. Silence fell over the ruined house. Lorenzo stood there, swaying, blood dripping from his hand. He looked at the body, then slowly turned his head. He looked at Leo. "Leo." Lorenzo whispered, his voice broken. Leo ran. He didn't run away. He ran to his father. Lorenzo dropped to his knees, ignoring his injuries, and caught the boy. "Daddy?" Leo sobbed, burying his face in Lorenzo's neck. "Daddy, don't die. I'm not going to die." Lorenzo wept, tears mixing with the blood on his face. He held his son tighter than he had ever held anything. "I heard you. I heard you, Leo." Imelda walked over, dropping the flare gun. She fell to her knees beside them, wrapping her arms around both of them. Lorenzo looked at her over Leo's head. His eyes were soft, the ice completely melted. "You did this," he whispered to Imelda. "You gave him back to me." "We did it," Imelda said, resting her forehead against his. The sound of sirens wailed in the distance. The police were finally coming. But the war was over. The Ivanovs were broken. And the Moretti family, the real family, was just beginning. Epilogue. 6 months later. The Moretti Center for Pediatric Speech and Trauma opened on a sunny Saturday in June. It was the most advanced clinic in the country, fully funded by an anonymous donor. Imelda stood at the podium cutting the red ribbon. She wore a white dress, simple but elegant. Her hand rested on her stomach, where a very small, very new life was just beginning to grow. In the front row, Lorenzo Moretti sat wearing a suit that cost more than the building. He wasn't looking at his phone. He was looking at his wife with a reverence that terrified his enemies and delighted the gossip columns. Next to him sat Leo. He was holding a microphone. "Thank you all for coming," Leo said into the mic. His voice was steady, confident. "My mom worked really hard on this place." The crowd cheered. Lorenzo leaned over and kissed Imelda's hand as she sat down. "You know," he whispered, "I think he likes the microphone too much. He might run for mayor one day." "Better than a mob boss," Imelda teased. "I don't know." Lorenzo smirked, rubbing his thumb over the simple gold band on her finger. I think the Mafia life suits you, Mrs. Moretti. You swing a mean frying pan." Imelda laughed, the sound ringing out clear and happy. She looked at her husband, the man who had burned the world down to keep her safe, and her son, who had found his voice to save them. "Just shut up and kiss me, Lorenzo." And right there in front of the press, the cameras, and the entire city of Chicago, the Mafia Don obeyed his wife. What a ride, from a terrified waitress scraping by on tips to the queen of the Chicago underworld. Imelda didn't just find love, she found her power. She proved that sometimes the most dangerous weapon isn't a gun, it's a voice. And Lorenzo, he learned that a heart isn't a weakness, but the only thing worth fighting for. If you loved this story, smash that like button right now. Did you expect Leo to save the day? Would you have forgiven Lorenzo for the danger he put her in? Let me know in the comments below, with the word legend, if you think Leo is the true MVP. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a story. We have a crazy cheating revenge drama coming up next week that you do not want to miss. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.